Wonderful, yeah, that's a great introduction, particularly the comment about warts and all. I think in the startup space, because we're riding on reputation and outgoing appearances and whatnot, there's a lot of facades and there's a lot of sort of misinformation out there. So it's really a credit to 376 for putting this session on, where I think it's an opportunity for a bit more bare bones kind of information, because for people starting out in this space, it's kind of difficult to get a hold of that bare bones sort of information. So Newie Ventures is, well, I called it not your typical startup story, but in the startup space, probably being atypical is kind of typical. So we certainly don't fall into a lot of the categories that are defined around the startup space, but we think we've got a place to, a part to play anyway. This is a picture of the three founders here, and it's a picture that we've used before to kind of give the impression that we're human beings first, and we're entrepreneurs second, and the two aren't different. We've got a life to lead as well as running a company. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach. Generally with these startup pitches, you talk about the problem you're trying to solve and the validation process that you've gone through. Our problem is a meta problem. It's a problem that we were trying to solve ourselves. Why start up? Why start a business? Why leave a comfortable job and go out into the great unknown? Well, for us it was career stagnation. It was lack of the ability to express our talents and our desires and our wants. It was the fact that I was being paid a comfortable salary for doing very, very little. And that's only satisfying for so long. We're only on the earth for a limited amount of time, and we all want to flourish, and we all want to achieve, and I felt that within the corporate environment I wasn't getting that opportunity. I was born an innovator. I've always been an innovator. I want to innovate. It's an innate drive, and within the environment that I was in, I felt that was being stifled, and I didn't have that opportunity. So ultimately I was looking for an avenue where we could apply our talents to create new great things, make a little dent in the universe, as Steve Jobs would put it. So, like any problem, we had to validate it. Is our solution going to work? And for us, starting a venture was about knowing whether there was a scene that we could play in. Are there people that are going to support us? Is there a community of people that get the entrepreneurial drive, that get the innovation scene, that want to contribute and want to help out and want to push the needle on things? And will it be enough to sustain the venture? Are we going to have to go back to our jobs 12 months later because there's just not enough going on? Can I convince anyone that this will be a fun ride and they ought to join me, come along on this unknown journey? And ultimately, can we fall back? Are people going to take us back into the corporate world, ultimately, if this thing doesn't go? And it turns out the answer is yes to those questions. I was really, really pleased. I came to events like this, although this event wasn't around at the time. I came to innovation events. I went to Innovators Lunch. I went to various events that the university and that the council were putting on. And to my delight, I discovered that there was an entrepreneurial innovation scene in Newcastle. And that was unknowns to me. I was working in research and development, in electronic product research and development, and I wasn't aware that there was an entrepreneurial innovation scene in Newcastle. So I had to separate myself from the corporate world and get involved with these people that are movers and shakers off their own volition. They're not part of any particular company necessarily, but they're internally motivated to innovate. So I was really excited to discover that, and it gave us the confidence to venture out and give it a go. So we started with a innovation. We jumped into the smart parking space. We saw that as a great place to apply our talents. I saw a very clear gap in the current offerings, and it seemed like a great problem to solve. It's a problem that resonates with lots of people, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We put together a pitch application to Slingshot's Jumpstart accelerator that was running at the time with NRMA, and that process of distilling our thoughts down into a pitch application was extremely useful for us. Asked a lot of questions that we hadn't considered before, and it forced us to take that time to think things through. And we were shortlisted, and so we travelled down to Sydney to one of these high-rise apartments and pitched our hearts out in front in front of a panel of representatives from NRMA and from Slingshot. And for us, as engineers, very, very capable engineers, it was our first time learning what it meant to define a customer, what it meant to find your product market fit, what a total addressable market was and why that mattered, and in fact what the term business model means. For me, all these terms seem easy to understand. They're just words, they're not complicated words, but we'd never really delved deeply into them and understand what they actually mean and what it means to solve them. There's a lot behind those words. You know, they get bandied around, but there's a great deal of depth that's necessary to fully understand what those terms mean. So the timeline of how things went, that pitch application, we were unsuccessful, but we got a heap of great feedback. Slingshot were really forthcoming with feedback and support and encouragement to move things along. So we decided in September 2015, coming up to our 2-year anniversary, to incorporate, and we ran a smart parking pilot of some early technology at the University of Newcastle. We deployed some smart parking occupancy sensors at a car park at the university so that we could monitor whether those car parks were available or not. We tried to push things along at the University of Newcastle. We discovered that that was extremely difficult, very, very difficult to engage with an organisation of that size, and certainly their rhetoric around engaging with entrepreneurs and being innovative and saying yes more than no was right up our alley. But in practice, it's a big beast, and there's a lot of people there that haven't quite got the message. So we faced a lot of brick walls, and we faced a lot of slow, agonising kind of processes. And much to our disappointment, in the end, we abandoned our efforts at the University of Newcastle in about October. And we went private. We looked for other avenues outside the university, and within a couple of days we had approval to do larger trials at 3 other sites around Newcastle. So that turned out 6-8 months later that was a good decision. We probably should have made it 6 or 8 months earlier. In February 2017 we realised that really the stuff we were doing in smart parking was separate to the stuff we were doing in Newie Ventures, and we were sort of muddying the waters there. And so we spun out the smart parking stuff as under a separate entity, and so that's now known as Foresight Parking. We had a lot of work going on outside the smart parking space, and we were being running off our feet, and so we got to the exciting point of needing more people. So we gained our first part-time employee in February this year, and just recently we gained our first full-time employee as well. March 2017 we signed a memorandum of understanding with Best Park, which is a mob that operate out of here occasionally. They're ex-students at the university, and they do a smart parking app. We do smart parking devices that instrument car parks, so it was a perfect marriage between our two companies, and we're collaborating together on the honeysuckle pilot. So just behind this building here we've got a smart parking pilot running in the honeysuckle precinct, where we're instrumenting the car park and Best Park are providing the customer-facing app. So that's where we are now. So effectively there's two sides to Newie Ventures. The first is Foresight Parking. Now the problem we're trying to solve there is the fact that when you drive into town, you're in an air-conditioned, automatic, excellent vehicle that needs to be put somewhere, and it always seems so backwards that you need to find a spot to put your vehicle, even though that's not part of your journey. So if I want to go to the pub and I want to drive there, then I'll need to find somewhere to put the car before I can get to the pub. And at the moment we go to our destination and we sort of circle out from there and we're trying to find an available park. And that's time consuming, it adds to congestion, and it's just agonising. It causes missed meetings and frustration and whatnot. So we're trying to solve a simple problem: finding a park, locating the available car parks. We've zeroed in on a niche, and that's the instrumentation of outdoor car parks. Councils at the moment have available a number of systems where they can instrument every car park, put a sensor in each bay, and find and then determine the occupancy of the car park bay that way. They're discovering that they're expensive to retrofit to existing car parks. The car parks need to be put out of action for a period of time while they're installing them. They're expensive to maintain. Each of those devices have batteries. They fail at unpredictable times, and they each need to be serviced. and they're also inaccurate. They're confused by park trolleys, they're confused by changes in the Earth's magnetic field. They're discovering after much expense that these things don't work real well. So we've got an alternative. We've got something that we call the access tracker, where we measure the vehicles coming in and out of the car park at the entrance. So at Honeysuckle, there's a 256 bay car park that we monitor with a single sensor, and we do that in real time, wireless, live. So with a single sensor, we can provide instrumentation on the occupancy level of that car park indefinitely in real time. Anyone can look it up at any point in time, and we also do prediction as well. Based on historical events, we can say it's going to take you half an hour to get to the location. The occupancy level is likely to be this. Either abandon your intention to go to that car park or come right in. There's going to be available car parks. So we think we've got a pretty nice niche there that helps push the needle on smart parking and helps make it a feasible sort of technology. On the other side, Newie Ventures also does product development. So we solve the pain point of going from a conception to a marketable product. That journey is treacherous, very challenging. Typically, the people that have these ideas and want to go to market are one of two. They're either within a corporation and they're stifled by the corporate bureaucracy, by their day-to-day activities, by simply keeping the business running. Or they're solo people who think they've got a great idea. They might be sole traders, or they might be just tinkering on something on the side, and they don't have the resources to understand what it's going to take to get to that final position. So we're involved in taking people along that journey, to guide, to provide research, to do feasibility studies, to decide whether that's a good idea or not, whether it can be done, whether it disobeys the laws of physics and therefore should be abandoned, or whether it's just simply not cost feasible and it should be abandoned, or whether there's something there worthwhile pursuing, and we can take you along. So in-house, we've got a rare combination of skills that a lot of other players in this field don't have. We've got hardware, electronic skills, and design for manufacturer experience. And we've got graphic designer in-house, and we've got skills in artificial intelligence and all sorts of buzzwordy sort of tech. Where we don't have in-house skills, we say it up front. We leverage the network effect. It's really important in a nimble organisation like ours to remain nimble, to not have too many people on staff, to not spend all your time servicing the business itself. So we maintain a small amount of staff, and we have a trusted network of experts that we call on to fill in those gaps that we need. That network effect is very, very valuable. These people are hard to find and they're hard to maintain. And so we work to maintain a network of people that we can trust and that we can draw on and use. So what have we managed to do? This is an opportunity for us to reflect on what we've done at Newie Ventures. And number one, we've been profitable. We haven't taken any external money. We don't owe anyone anything, and none of us have gone broke, which is, I think, an achievement. More importantly, we've been innovating. In the 3 years prior to launching this innovation, I was unable to get a single product to market. And that was immensely frustrating. Since, in the 18 months since Newie Ventures has launched, we've got 5 products onto market that are producing revenue for the companies that paid for those products. All the team members that I asked to come along with me on the ride on day one are still fully engaged as they were on day one. And that's a source of pride for me, that people saw the appeal of the vision that I had, and they invested their own time and life and sense of purpose into that vision. And they're carrying it and they're defining it in their own way, and they're moving along with the journey. In the 7 years prior to forming Newie Ventures, I had no appearances in the local newspaper. It took about 6 months after forming Newie Ventures to get in the local newspaper. Not a big thing, but certainly the opportunity for recognition and for my potential impact to be recognised is far greater, and we've really leveraged that effect. That's been enjoyable. We've been able to learn how to do a startup by actually doing it. As I said before, these terms that people bandy around, they seem simple. And you think, well, I can read a book, I can watch a presentation, how hard can it be? Well, we learn a great more by actually doing it. So we've had an opportunity to walk that path and understand what's involved and how difficult it is and what the nuances are in undertaking that sort of thing. So much so that both my co-founders actually now run a side hustle. My financial controller runs a financial planning business as a sole provider, and our operations manager runs a yoga training course. We've been able to push the needle on the Internet of Things in Australia. The Internet of Things is something dear to my heart, and I think it's got incredible potential, and I think Australia is in danger of missing out, of letting it go by and then buying in the results when it's all said and done. So we've been able to push things along. Newcastle IOT Pioneers, which is a group that I founded and run, is the premier IoT group in Newcastle, and it's well recognised nationally as an important group on the domestic scene. We're also doing technical things in the Internet of Things. We've launched the only LoRaWAN infrastructure installation in Newcastle that is working commercially. LoRaWAN is a very important technology within the Internet of Things space, and there's a lot of people talking about it, a truckload of people talking about it, and there's very few doing it. So we've been able to push things along there. We're also advancing the hardware startup space in Australia. Hardware startups are poorly understood in Australia. Startups are poorly understood in Australia, but hardware startups particularly so. I'm taking on a role with 1804 to more formally push things along. 1804 is recognised domestically as a pioneer in the hardware startup space. I think this is a really, really important role for 1804 to play, and it's being recognised. I was reminded, someone showed me the Eventbrite story about this event. I think it was really well written. I liked it, but I think it really indicates. Is there another page? I've got it here. I think it really indicates some of the challenges that we have as hardware startups when it says that our past and current projects include parking apps and software for small wind turbines. It's close, but we've never done a parking app and we've never done software for small wind turbines. So what we've done is we've done smart parking devices and we've done small wind turbines. And I think that subtle difference is very, very significant. I think the software space, software is eating the world, it's clear, but it's also eating people's minds. I think people figure that apps and innovation are synonymous, and for a hardware startup, that's a difficult narrative to try and dislodge. So we're pushing things uphill, but I think 1804 is in an exceptional place to be a leader and to be a pioneer about the unique challenges and the unique offerings that hardware startups can bring to Australia. Via 1804, we're forming some links with some international incubators as well. As a hardware startup, if you're going to go full scale, if you're going to go millions of units and you're going to go into production, you're going to be looking at China. China's a very difficult place for Australian startups to access, but there's some really exciting, really interesting things happening in this space to help people along that journey. And so 1804 is at the forefront of forming those links, and I'm excited to be part of that and be pushing things along. More than $1 million worldwide sales of our own product. Not yet. Haven't checked that one off yet, but that's okay. We've done a lot of really interesting things, a lot of exciting things, and we're really enjoying the journey. Okay, I'm going to take a side step here. Someone once told me that presentations ought to be a gift to the audience, they're not for the presenter. So I want to give you something that I've been thinking about. This is something that I've never seen anyone talk about. I'm sure there must be people talking about it, but people sort of seem to gloss over it very, very quickly. As entrepreneurs, we're human beings first, and we probably have similar sort of goals out of life. And for me, what I'm always looking for is the overlap between these three circles. There's some things that I'm good at, there's some things that I love doing, and there's some things that people will pay me to do. Right in the centre of that is the sweet spot that we're always looking for. So if you do what you love and you're good at it, then you'll be having fun, but you'll be broke. If you do what you love and someone will pay for it, then it's probably not going to last because someone will come along and do it better. You better quickly get good at it. And if you're doing what you're good at and people are paying you for it, but you don't love it, then you're leading a monkey life. So for me, we're always trying to navigate this centre. And I think as entrepreneurs, we get coerced into a particular path that is the established narrative. And for me, I take a step back regularly and think, is that path going to point me towards the sweet spot in the middle of this circle, or am I going to spend 5 years over here, or 3 years here going broke, or 2 years up here going nowhere? So I'm really excited that Newie Ventures has been a platform for us to find that sweet spot at the middle of those three circles. And to finish, I want to explain this thought. This thought actually came to me while I was at an art exhibition. And at the front of the art exhibition, the art director, who is showcasing a new artist, was talking about the artist that he was showcasing. The artist was standing next to him. And the art director was waxing lyrical about how much potential she has and how she's an undiscovered artist and how her work represents these themes and these emotions and resonates with these people, and that it would look really good on your wall, and here's some shots of what the artwork would look like in your space, and what a wonderful talent she is, and I'm really proud to have her here. Her works, her price list is here, and I'm so glad that she's here showcasing her works in my gallery. I hope you buy lots and lots of them. And then he handed over to the artist, and the artist said, "It was so hard. I've been trying for years and years to do this, and my partner was supportive, and I wouldn't have got here otherwise. And I get up in the morning and I get angry, and my partner says, go out and paint, and I go out and paint, and I don't know really what I'm doing, but I'm throwing some colours down, and I think there's some emotion in there, and I like this colour, but this bit was really hard, and then it was so wide, and then we had some problems with blah, yada, 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 yada." And that difference between the artist and the art director couldn't have been more stark. And I thought, wow, there's a really good analogy there for potential entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs come to the entrepreneur space as artists. They're very good craftsmen. They have a talent with their hands or with a keyboard or in solving problems or doing something. And they will do that in the absence of reward, in the absence of payment, in the absence of a business necessarily. They would do it just because they've got a yearning to do it, and they want to do that, and they want to do it over and over and over again. And then you've got entrepreneurs that come to the table who want to build businesses, and what they're looking for is artists. They're looking for people who are talented, people whose wares that they can showcase and show the world and open up to new markets, and they can display. And I think I've discovered maybe over the last 24 months that it's extremely difficult as an artist to be an art director, and as an art director to be an artist. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you. What do we do? Open it up to questions? Anyone? Shoot, if anyone's got any.
You talked about how there's a strong misunderstanding in Australia about not only what startups are, but also issues that hardware startups have. What do you think are the three biggest misconceptions that we have about hardware startups?
You ask very good questions. Three biggest misconceptions. So one is that hardware innovation can be done at night at home in front of the computer. That it doesn't need a space, a facility, some benches, some equipment, some gear, some a physical space in order to operate in. That's often missed. So in the entrepreneurial scene in Australia, people often think that the space is less relevant to entrepreneurs, but for hardware entrepreneurs, I think the space is incredibly important. Somewhere to spread your tools out and to tinker with things and put them together and shape stuff up and throw some tools everywhere. The second most important misconception is that the runways are similar. The ability to pivot and to seek feedback and respond to feedback and whatnot as a hardware startup is radically different to a software startup, and that's often not recognised. It's not recognised at all that there would be a distinction between those two things.
In what way?
So, for example, if you want to do A/B testing as a software startup, then you put up 2 versions of your software and you collect responses and you pick the one that has the best response. As a hardware startup, it's going to take you 6 months to develop prototype A and 6 months to develop prototype B before you can present them both and get feedback on them. So it's just a whole different ballgame about how you should be seeking feedback and how you should be iterating and whatnot. Maybe the third misconception is where the drop-off points are for revenue generation. So as a software startup, you can often deliver an MVP very quickly that solves most of the problem and generates revenue. The concept of an MVP for a hardware startup is radically different. If you're going to put a product in people's hands and it's a physical product, then it needs to not catch fire. It needs to not cut them open. Software can't catch fire, it can't cut you. So as a hardware startup, the concept of an MVP is very different as well.
You mentioned that Australia is in danger of being left behind with IoT. Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So one of the aspects is that, this IoT is probably just the latest example of where potentially we get left behind. Because historically, Australia has been a manufacturer of wool, or an exporter of steel, or of ore, of things that we dig out of the ground. And we have this customary notion that we export wool and ore, and we buy electronics from overseas somewhere. And as we transition away from those sorts of primary industries, or at least they become less important, we have this plethora of engineering talent still dormant in Australia that are saying, no, we can build these things. We have these talents. Electronics doesn't just magically appear from China. We can produce these things and we can export it and then and make a profit from it. So there's an historical aspect to that, where Australia is just has always been culturally of the opinion that that technology is something we buy. But IoT brings with it its own challenges as well. One of the aspects is that we're a very small market, and the Internet of Things is a global technology, and the Australian radio licensing agreements have been slow to adopt international rules. Recently, they've really pulled their finger out, which is really encouraging. So I think they took the same sort of we'll buy it when it's ready kind of approach, and they've changed their tune, and now they're like, no, we need to be participating in this. So Europe has a certain radio scheme, US has a certain radio scheme, and Australia and New Zealand have a certain radio scheme. So if you're doing long distance communications, you need a different product in those 3 regions, which are the predominant regions. And because we are such a small market, the big players in America and Europe often neglect Australia. And so we get the third wave of innovation after it's been proven in the major dominant markets, and they're looking for saturation, for worldwide distribution. And so this is a perfect opportunity for Australia to be leaders here, to say we're perfectly capable of doing Internet of Things type technology. let's establish some laws, let's set up the frameworks so we can actually build things and then export them, and we'll change our products to suit international markets. Instead of international manufacturers saying, oh yeah, Australia, we'll get to them when we get to them. So that's just one example of my main fear, is that Australia has this mindset of buying technology, of assuming technology is invented overseas.
Is that due to possibly, hardware works by scale, so you profit by selling many units of product, because Australia's such a small market for that stuff?
Yeah.
That's
It's definitely a big part of it, and I'm concerned that the startup narrative has steered so heavily towards mass manufacture. There is a great deal of innovation that we can do in Australia which is not mass manufacture. We can do ag tech products that have an enormous addressable market that don't get into that mass manufacture side. And we have expertise, and we have environmental conditions, and we have particular problems that are fairly unique, that can be solved here and then exported. So this concept that because we're so small, we'll wait for it to be available everywhere and then eventually we'll get the dribbles, I think is flawed. When you look at our scale, our particular requirements, and those niches in med tech and ag tech and whatnot that need to be solved here first and then can be exported.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, stuff like with medtech, I sell the proposition that using a place like Newcastle in Australia as a test is great to confirm and validate what you've done, and then you take it to the world stage. So you've got a good base that you can test and trial in, which is our country, and then use that as a launching pad.
Yeah. There's those classic stories about how international companies, when they're developing a new product, will launch it in Newcastle first, because if Novocastrians accept it, anyone will accept it.
So how was it difficult pivoting from per car sensor type technology to per car part, and were you emotionally attached to that first product?
Yeah, sure, but it was pretty easy to lose that emotional attachment when I saw how it was being saturated, and how we're quickly going to become a drop in the ocean. I've always had the intention of never competing. I think this has been influenced by reading Peter Thiel, the ex PayPal fellow who wrote a book called Zero to One, thank you. And in that he talked about how you should never look to compete. You should look for monopolies. You should look for areas that no one else is competing in, and then you can set the direction. And so that was the incentive for pivoting there, was that there was already a bunch of individual base sensors, and we were going to be another one of those, and we would have to compete on marketing effectively. And our strengths in marketing are fairly absent. So yeah, we're interested in being unique, finding a niche.
So it seems in the last few years, or definitely has, barriers to entry have dropped significantly for hardware startups. Now that's kind of bringing it back way closer, I guess, to software startups in terms of barrier to entry costs, development costs, manufacturing, and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do we leverage that, the capability now that it's getting a lot cheaper?
Absolutely, it's changed. It's gotten a hell of a lot better. That's a really important observation. 3D manufacturing and turnaround times on electronic parts and international distribution has made things dramatically easier. So if we don't capture this opportunity, then we ought to kick ourselves in the bum. How do we leverage it? I think we've still got to talk about the requirements of a hardware startup. I think the software startups have dictated the narrative, and so people apply these requirements that a software startup needs just across the board. And so we need to talk about our particular needs and wants and issues and requirements, and also what we give back. What's the point of a hardware startup? Why should we be interested in hardware startups? So I think we've just got to keep talking about that, what our story is, and differentiate it from the software startup world.
So Heath, you went to China recently. Tell us a bit more about that trip, where you went, what you saw, how it can apply back in Australia or not.
Sure. Yeah. I wrote a couple of thousand words about it recently. So if you want to jump on LinkedIn and look me up, you can have a read of annotated with photographs and stuff, so it's not too lengthy. But the takeaways really, Andrew articulated this really well the other day, I think. One of the things we discovered was that that China is exceptional at manufacturing. Absolutely, they're world leaders. They're very, very good at taking a particular thing and making many of them. If you say, if you dictate your device to look like this and feel like this and whatnot, then that's how it comes out. So if you make some mistakes, or you don't say that, obviously there needs to be something between there and there. If you don't dictate that thing, then it'll come out without that thing between there and there. So you need to be very explicit about what you want. We discovered that China is a difficult place to operate in. The language barrier is significant. The customs and the cultures and the laws and whatnot are unfamiliar to most Western people, and that Hong Kong is an excellent intersection point between China and the Western world. It still maintains a lot of Western culture, and it has a credible port system and set of logistics for operating with China. So Hong Kong is a key part of that relationship. We discovered that earning trust and getting on the same page with Chinese manufacturers is challenging. They say that after you've spent 10 years in China, you're still about 10 years away from learning the culture and understanding what it's like. And after you've spent 20 years in China, you're still probably about 10 years away from understanding the culture. So it's a difficult place for Westerners to operate. So one of my major takeaways was that you need people that you trust that are well linked in China, that are able to translate for you and able to negotiate and able to just give you some confidence that that you're both on the same page and where you're going. China is growing up. We visited some interesting factories where they were disappointed that there was a conception that China is cheap and crap. They manufactured things for Japan. And to be a manufacturer for things from Japan was a badge of pride for them, which is interesting given the animosity between China and Japan. But for this factory, the fact that Casio were coming to them and asking them to manufacture things meant that they could make good quality stuff. And so China is an enormous place, and they run the full spectrum between cheap and cheerful to highly sophisticated, very high quality products. As one of the fellows we met over there said, your Apple iPhone comes from China, so they can do high quality sort of gear, and they can do cheap copies. So it's a huge place, and we certainly didn't learn it all just by spending a week there, but it was extremely eye-opening. There's no doubt that they are geared up and excellent at mass manufacture. And so if you want to do mass manufacture, you've just got to be in China.
And so the projects you've done for clients, you mentioned 5 in the last however many months, and they've all been hardware?
That's right. Yep.
And where do you get those manufactured?
So my key strengths are in the industrial space, where mass manufacture is not necessary. We're talking high value, low volume products, which is a particular niche that's often forgotten. It drives a great deal of Australian industry, is high value, low volume products. So for those products, they're manufactured locally. So give an example, well, a couple of examples, a device for measuring people falling asleep while they're driving that we did recently is manufactured on the Central Coast. They've got a team of workshop assemblers who pull the electronics in and assemble them and program them and ship them out the door in a box. I did a device for finding leaks in sewer pipes, and that's manufactured in Melbourne. They've set up a production shop to manufacture those. And again, these things are high value, low volume products, and Australia is perfectly good at doing that. That's one aspect that I probably should have mentioned about China, is that there's not necessarily much incentive for doing prototyping in China. Australia is perfectly capable of doing low volume manufacture. So yeah, I'd consider that differentiation between low volume and high volume. Australia is very good at low volume manufacturing, provided the product is high value, so that you can afford the cost.
You've done pretty well for a hardware startup, being able to bootstrap yourselves and actually make money in such a short time period. What do you think are the key drivers and contributors to your success?
The fact that we didn't focus on our product, which is utterly blasphemous in the startup world. If we had done so, we would have been years away from profitability if we got there, and we probably would have gone back to our day jobs. We focused on the value that we could provide now. So it's simply that, I suppose, the fact that we focused on revenue generating activities now, so that we could stay in business long enough to keep the dream alive. Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend that in all circumstances. Certainly, focus is important, and it's not something we did.
You've been really pivotal, not just in the Newcastle sort of IoT scene, but also nationally. I think your meetup here was one of 2 or 3 in Australia for quite a while, and I think it's taken off more recently. Why? You've told us about your troubles, your challenges in facing it. Why waste your time doing that sort of community stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. If it was wasted time, we wouldn't do it.
Why not just sit in your shed and work and
yeah,
build the product?
yeah, absolutely. Look, networking is key. Networking is utterly key. The Newcastle IOT Pioneers was set up to scratch our own itch. We were pioneering in the IoT space, and we thought we can't be the only ones. We can't be the only ones hitting all these roadblocks and buying in products and then discovering they don't do what they're supposed to do, or dealing with the Australian Communication Media Alliance and their shifting rules about when you can transmit and when you can receive. So we thought, surely we can share some information here. And so the Newcastle IoT Pioneers was absolutely an endeavour to scratch our own itch. But it's grown into something much, much more than that. It's also been an opportunity to be a conduit for the IoT discussion, which has been extremely valuable. So you're quite right, when the Sydney IoT meetup wants to look at the scene in Australia, then they recognise that Newcastle IoT Pioneers has this huge catchment area here north of Sydney, and that they're the place to go to see what's happening in the local scene. So I'm not doing everything in the local scene, but people are still coming to me to be that contact point so I can share things out. So if it wasn't providing those benefits, yeah, we'd probably can it. But no, there's lots of ancillary benefits coming out of it. I think you knew the answer to that, didn't you?
So maybe we could just wrap with one more thing to touch on the IoT Pioneers. There'll be some people in the audience that don't know who, what, when, where, why.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just tell them some examples of the past events that you've had.
Sure, yeah. So Newcastle IoT Pioneers meets the first Thursday of every month. Next August, the first Thursday in August will be our 1-year anniversary, which is an exciting milestone. So every month we just have a fairly informal get-together, and we get a guest presenter who speaks on various topics. So we've done all the verticals from smart city to industrial to automotive to anything else that the Internet of Things plays in. We've touched on security a couple of times. We've touched on entrepreneurism as well, the startup scene in the IoT space. So we've got a variety of topics in the Internet of Things world. It's not meant to be a technical level presentation. It's meant to be about seizing the opportunity, advancing the state of the art, and making sure that Newcastle, and Australia in particular, doesn't miss out on the opportunity that the Internet of Things provides. So it's free to attend. It's on every first Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. at the Stag and Hunter, and you can find us on meetup.com. Did I cover everything there? Cool. Excellent. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.